Valistea, a continent surrounded by an ocean of poison. Protected by the light of the crystals, powerful kingdoms have risen around them. Along with those born with the natural gift of magic, bearers enslaved to do their bidding. These crystals are an invaluable resource that can bring any civilization to its peak. Their guardians are the champions called dominants, who are chosen by the crystals to protect them, but at a great price. Ether is the lifeblood that powers their magic, the dominants, and the crystals themselves, and with every use creeps the rot, threatening to swallow all into darkness. What's up, everyone? It's your beloved God of Chaos making a comeback with his first gaming review of Final Fantasy 16. I personally feel that Final Fantasy 16 is worthy of being a next-gen game, and enjoyed it immensely. I will give you what I truly feel is my human and I's opinion on the game, how we felt, what people can expect, the good, the bad, and the ugly. With that being said, let's move on to the actual review with your host, good old me, in this limited spoiler review. So to wrap it up in a cute way, Valistea is the continent. Then on it live little humans doing little human things like farming and making bread. But there's an issue. You see, other than the hordes of scary monsters, you have something called the Blight, slowly creeping on their world. It spreads to the land, the plants, the animals, making food scarce, but more so, taking away magic. The Blight and magic is a struggle for balance. You see, the lifeblood of the planet is called ether. When you use magic, magic drains ether. Use too much, the supply gets low. When it gets too low, it triggers a blight. Then to avoid starvation and death, humans play the gods like me and start twerking for rain or something. But if the blight is caused by the loss of ether, how are they draining it anyway? That comes down to the crystals, those giant Jolly Ranchers that exist in Valistea. You have cherry, grape, green apple, root beer, blueberry, coconut, whiskey, and a hidden cherry coke flavor that's Clive himself. They are massive sources of ether. Chipping off pieces from them allow people to use magic. But you don't like spending money on crystals all the time? Don't worry, just buy a slave. Some humans are born with the ability to use magic without crystals. Just treat them like shit and force them to use magic for you longer. They'll just turn to stone and you can use them in a headpiece in your garden or something like that. Oh, jeez.
The curse has taken them. All of them.
As it does every bearer forced to use their gift.
Okay.
With each draw on the ether, their bodies petrify, till all that remains is stone and pain, and so they are cast aside.
Yeah, humans are great, right? Then you have dominants who are chosen by their icons of the Jolly Ranchers. Icons basically being gods and dominants the ones that they reside in. They are meant as protectors for each crystal. At least that's what the people think. They become massive kaijus capable of immense power. Nothing I'd sweat over, but they are impressive. But at a terrible cost. Every time a dominant transforms, they use a massive amount of ether. From there, all the problems are being caused by a god named Ultima, who's stockpiling ether to cast the ultimate spell to cleanse the planet of the Blight. I'll just let you discover the rest on your own. Cute little way I summed it up for you, huh? Yeah. I truly love the story. I love the use of crystals in this story, especially with the use of some pretty horrific political issues. The crystals represent hope, power, and the defining symbol of those who rule. They are so useful that anyone who controls them can provide food and protection to their people without issues. But then it leads to a blight, and that threatens to take away everything. A perfect representation of humans and nature. Nature gives you everything, and yet you never give back, eventually killing yourselves in your greed. You know, that on top of all the wars it caused, all the mass murders. Yeah, crystals, very much worth it indeed. So many good monsters in this game. It's not a lot of them, Like, the beast area is actually kind of small, but I felt like they used monsters pretty well throughout the game, and then the boss fights made up a lot of it as well. So goblins, orcs, those little assholes with one eye, many of them manipulated by the main villain through the use of a phenomenon called the Aether Flood. It's when Aether is so concentrated, anything living gets turned into the Holy. He can control and manipulate anybody who enters his state. Something that happens to dominants even, when they absorb too much Aether, resulting in something like Titan Lost. Then the bearers. Those poor bearers. People with the ability to use magic turned into slaves and looked at with animosity. The game does a great job at giving tons of examples from different perspectives. The little girl giving all her slaves the same name, not understanding what death meant for them, just that she had to replace another toy.
The other Chloes had pretty hair.
Fuck!
Months before Dad gives me another one. I have to wait until they're too tired to work anymore.
Is that all she was to you? A plaything? Do you really not care that she's dead?
The man and his best friend who do everything together had a place at his table just to be reported by the same man he once called a brother because he could use magic.
To have lived free for so many years, only to be betrayed by a friend.
Yeah, that's super fucked up.
Why, Ron? After all these years.
But it shows you the mindset people have for these bearers, right?
A coliseum created to use bearers as test subjects and target practice. Then when their usefulness came to an end, fed them to the monsters they tried to tame. There are so many horrific examples that honestly made me cringe from the realization. But it was very good to show for the actions of the supporting characters. Sid, who wants to destroy the crystals, for instance. The Resistance, who shows no mercy to slavers and those who own them. The Dame, Martha, and other incredible characters risking their lives to help them. A lot of these methods, like I mentioned, was used during the days of actual slavery, so I'm glad that they really went that far that they could justify their actions instead of just saying, yo, we have slaves in this world, right? And not really showing the effects it has on the world and what people need to do to survive in these situations. There is enough story to draw me and keep me interested from start to finish. Maybe a tad longer than it needed to be, but I'll get back to that later. I realized that I loved the story about 4 hours in, and my only fears were would it hold up, and how would the characters support this tale of gods looking down upon mortals. I felt that every single character, main and support, hero or villain, were done very well. One of the few things that disappointed me with the first version of Final Fantasy 15 is that they did capture some of the emotion I wanted from the game, but they didn't take the time I desired for each character. Final Fantasy 16 clearly learned from this mistake and made sure to spend a sufficient amount of time on everyone. Clive, step by step, had the chance to go over his feelings as the character evolved. But not only the main character, even supporting characters through side quests got many incredible moments. Some of them like Gran and Goats, Tarja, best healer by the way, Big Bro Gav. One of the things I absolutely loved is how human they are. Many characters once leading lives some would find hard to forgive, but changing heart when meeting someone like Sid, who seems to give people hope for a new world, if just how passionate he is. Then going back to Gran, she's a real one. One of the sweetest and terrifying characters I had the pleasure of learning more about.
You remember what you told me when we last met? An eye for an eye.
Oh, that
Wise words,
explains that.
Wise words. And now it's time to collect.
Damn, she's a real one. You don't fuck with her. Sure. I really like her. I love everything about her character.
The depth to all of them, and the opportunity to learn more was truly appreciated by this god at least, and I personally hope they put this level of thought into every character they do from now on. Then that leads to Ultima themselves. Once again, I really don't want to tell you too much about the villain because I truly liked him a lot. But what I can get more into is how his goals and reasonings fully support each character in the game, leading to an explosive conclusion. They really didn't use him too much, more, let's say like 70% in, right? Before that you see bits and pieces, he'll be here and there. He was more of a looming shadow expressed through parchment and the location of temples you'll find throughout the game. Music requires no notes from me. Oh my fucking god, this music is incredible. From the auto music as you're traveling through the world, the battle theme, the boss themes, every last piece in this game brings emotion required to really make an intimate moment shine and really bring the hype for an intense scene. The final moments of the game does all of it at once, making me want to jump out of my seat, cheer, and cry at the same time. Oh, shit. I love the gameplay so much. I can say with confidence, anyone who's actually interested in the combat, it's not a button masher. There, it's not. Game actually requires some finesse and an attention to detail to handle many of the more dangerous creatures in the game. So where to start? Where to start? How about we get some of the simple stuff out of the way for those concerned about how stats work. So you have your HP, attack, and defense stats, you know, the basics. Stagger, the ability to overwhelm and knock down enemies easier. Strength affects, well, your power. Vitality affects defense, and will affects your magic. Honestly, barely matters. I honestly hate to say it, but it matters, but it doesn't. But of course it matters if you want to go through some fights faster with extra power. Extra health means you can make more mistakes, and same goes for defense. Of course, but that's as deep as it gets. Weapons and armor honestly are just as simple as the stats. They raise power, defenses, and stagger. This actually goes into some of the complaints I do have about the game. Accessories are much more complicated at least, but straightforward enough that you don't need to think too hard about it. Many of them raise power of skills, raise damage, add to health, limit break generation, best boys attack damage, or heal. There are actually many accessories that made me happy, and then some like the Berserker's Ring that I loved so goddamn much, but it goes deeper into the reason why weapons and armor being so simple I have a problem with. But once again, we'll get to that nearing the end of the video. So now off to those gameplay mechanics. Starting off is your basic attack. Clive can whip out 4 of them bad boys. Then you also have magic. You press triangle to go bang bang. You can hold it longer for a bigger bang. Second is your dodge. No need to explain, but if you dodge at the right time, you activate your beautiful dodge. That slows down time and allows you to do extra damage to the health and stagger gauges of enemies, or allow you to back off and prep something else. Next is the parry. My personal favorite. Time a basic attack at the same time when an enemy is about to attack, and you parry, stopping time for a moment to allow you to dish big damage and raise the stagger gauge. Which brings us to Square's favorite game mechanic over the last few years, and to be honest, one of mine personally, is the actual stagger gauge. Make enemy hurt enough, and it's time to thrash that sucker, dishing out lots more damage than you usually do. Then a little later in the game you unlock the fabled limit break that allows you to become a great ball of fire, scorching the battlefield, changing up some of your moves in the process. Torgal, sitting up there with Final Fantasy's best pups of all time, is a wonderful complement to battle. He has 3 moves: Sick, which is a simple follow-up attack, but depending on which moves you use after the attack changes. A launch and a smite that also changes properties depending when you do it. Then he also has a heal that's instant and slaps a little bandage on you. Now, it personally took my human a little while to get used to all the gameplay actions you can do, starting and what you can unlock. Luckily, the space in which you unlock these skills are spread out enough that you get more than enough time to get used to it. Because once you get other icons, this game gets so much better and a bit more complicated with all the actions you can take. So every icon has a skill tree containing 4 attacks, 3 normal skills and their ultimate skill. Each one behaves in a certain way to interact with yourself and enemies. But every icon also has an iconic skill. These are permanents that you cannot change, that greatly change how Clive plays the game. So no, there are technically no job classes in the sense of, let's say, Magic Knight or something from past Final Fantasies. But every icon itself is a class on its own. Their iconic abilities change up how they work, plus their skills, and you can mix and match these skills. So, for instance, you can have Garuda with her claws and have her with all of Ifrit's abilities. You can have Shiva with her iconic skill with the dodge plus Titan's abilities. By mixing and matching different ways of combat, you can truly express yourself through Clive's actions. And I put together a few things just to show you what is possible.
No mercy after that.
I fucked up. This game does nothing but reward creativity and supports how you want to play. Even the accessories made to help out those who aren't too good at action RPGs play better still supports other accessories and the skills to allow you to express yourself, to allow you to create the combos you want, to allow you to interact with the enemies that makes you most comfortable. Whether that be completely ranged magical bombardment or up close in their face going stylish on them. This game is incredible. I praise every aspect of the combat. With that being said, it's not a button masher. It takes more than just mashing buttons or using your skills wildly. Boss fights are very challenging, offering many strange monsters to fight against, some referencing monsters from other Final Fantasy titles like Liquid Flames, reimagined. Many boss fights give plenty of MMO dodge, the death zones opportunities, constantly keeping you on edge, along with health stages changing up the flow of gameplay. I had many great experiences with them. Which brings us to the biggest highlights of the game, the icon fights. Oh my god, these are incredible. The first battle was themed. You had to follow a track, but it allowed you some freedom. There was a lot you could actually do against Garuda if you saw the opportunity and the timing. But the others, oh my god, Typhoon. Oh my god, Titan lost. was a wonderful mix of experiences from other games I loved from my childhood. Seeing every icon do their work at any point of the game was amazing, but during battles against them, to truly experience feeling like a god and squaring off against another god was one that is priceless. I hope Square Enix finds a way to give summons, if they have them, this type of attention in every mainline Final Fantasy moving forward, whether I'm controlling them or not. You have hunts in the game. That's right. Special critters are running around and you gotta wrangle them up by, killing them. Some truly special fights in the hunts, and they give you more than a few. Some unlocking different areas, some more obvious. Not all of them are a challenge, but they're impressive. This is actually connected to one of the things I didn't like about the game, so we will save that also to the end of the video. Now, I know you've all heard about side quests, and it's exactly what you've heard. About 95% of them are fetch quests. They're not bad, but there are a lot of them, but that's not a bad thing. All the side quests expand on the lore, they expand on the world itself, the characters. I personally liked every single one. I learned a lot about characters that I enjoyed, characters that I personally didn't care for. I ended up liking a lot after experiencing these side quests. But they are a lot. There are a lot. And they do offer very simple rewards. Nothing too worth it unless you're trying to do crafting, but crafting itself also isn't very deep until later. So yeah, side quests I enjoyed, but I wish Square had done something else with them. Something experimental, something other than just fetch this, fight a monster, run back to town, and that's basically it for the side quest. So here we are finally at the area of the video I personally did not want to get to because I love everything about Final Fantasy 16, but it does have its problems like most games. So this is what I did not like about the game, something I may have been confused of, or I wish Square had expanded on. So my human put about 80 hours into the game, running around, exploring, doing hunts, but despite using their time to enjoy the game how they wanted, it still felt like the game was a little bit too long. The game had a wonderful pacing, got nice chunks of story leading to chunks of exciting gameplay story moments. Around halfway through it starts to slow down, ultimately leading to the finale. Not sure it's because they did every single side quest, but after a while it just felt like the game should have ended. There were many moments after, well past the halfway point, where we were kind of like, when is this going to end? I hate it because the voice actors and animators did such a wonderful job, but it should have been shorter in moments, particularly around the halfway point after encountering Barnabas for the first time. I think if the major story instances after that had been a sequence of battles leading up to a small dungeon towards the final boss, it would have been perfect. I had the complete opposite feeling with Final Fantasy 15, where in that one, at least the base game, I had to really look for those special moments. Final Fantasy 16 gave me everything I could ever want when it came to the story, character development, combat, so after a bit, it was just like, I want to feel the conclusion. They should have found a better way to wrap it all up, especially considering that the final stage of the game didn't even have a dungeon or anything like that. You simply start the final mission and then you fight the final boss and that's it. Now, don't get me wrong, once again, everything leading up to the final boss was perfect. Absolutely loved it. Loved Clive, loved his brother, loved Ultima. But it was a lot. If the last section of the game had been a series of battle tests, everything that you experience from the beginning of the game leading up to the point with Ultima, it would have been a fantastic boss rush situation leading up to the final boss. But once again, I did love what they did leading up to the Ultima fight, but I feel like somewhere around, once again, with Barnabas, if they had made the story far more linear from there, allowed the player to choose if they wanted to do side quests and stuff, but then let's say it is a sequence of battles of 10s. You go through the whole sequence. They give you a breath. They say, oh, you want to go back into the world and do side quests? I would have liked that. Instead of all the extra running around, going back and forward, I wish it was just kind of a straight line at that point. So that's my only complaint when it comes to the story. It's a little too long. It was wonderful. I love Square Enix's storytelling here. But yeah, a little bit shorter. So here we are at combat difficulty. The normal fights are a little easy once you get used to them. I thought boss fights were expressed perfectly, but after about 20 hours, the open area mobs are easy to rush through. The AI of these monsters is really sad too, for instance. Monsters will just surround you and it'll be at least a full 20 seconds before one of them decides to attack you. If you're hitting them, they'll tend to attack back more, but otherwise, they'll do nothing. Larger enemies are much more aggressive, and no notes on that. But these problems I mentioned, most of them are fixed in New Game Plus Final Fantasy mode, which begs the question, why did Square Enix make enemies this easy? Part of me wonders if it's because they wanted everyone to be able to play without issues, so much that they underestimated their players. But the players will learn to play if they love the game. They will adapt. Even with all other options to make gameplay easier for the people, it bothers me that they went that route until beating the game. This leads me back to the hunts. These two particular hunts will support my point. Square could have done more with simple mobs. Some enemies, such as this pack of dogs, it has a move where it howls and each dog one by one rushes down the player.
Look at that. Goddamn, they make good Pokemon. Speaking of, you know what, I'll get into that after I win.
Your advice, I told.
Yep. Ah, they're too heavy.
I love it. Love it so much. The dogs in the game still do this, but not to this capacity. When I saw this, I was so excited that more monsters would do this, but then I just turned out to be disappointed. Now, I haven't completely gone through New Game Plus Final Fantasy mode, so I can't commit to this thought, but once again, it was disappointing that I couldn't experience that in the normal game. When I saw this, like I said, I was excited. More monsters would do this, and yeah, the Hornets also did the same thing, but once again through a hunt itself. It would have added far more stress to battle on how to focus enemy numbers. Monsters do have skills, but I would have loved more surprises like these in hunts and far more aggression. This also goes into how there's not a lot of monsters in the bestiary. So I feel like they could have done more when it came to monster teamwork, added a lot more when it came to monsters acting in battle and reacting to your actions. Once again, a lot of this does get fixed in New Game Plus Final Fantasy mode, but I wish they had believed in their players enough that they could have made these mobs far more interesting from the beginning. Okay. So now we're really starting to get into it. This is actually one that annoyed me the most because they also give a great examples on how to expand in their weapons and armor systems. You start off with some good accessories that can help the player get used to the game, and they're pretty cool. You also get some accessories that reduce the cooldowns of your attacks and increase the damage of your attacks. Then you have more that raise your dog's power, your limit break gauge recharge rate, items, usefulness, and more. Accessories I thought were great. The problem I have is with the weapons and armor. I love that the weapons do show up on your back, but confused as to why we couldn't get armor to show itself. Honestly, armor not showing up on Clive isn't one of the biggest issues. It's just a small why not. It's not like you had anything super crazy. Even if you did, it's a video game. Let me have fun stuff on my Clive. Let me have Clive walking around like a Western cowboy all day, right? What really gets me about this game is the lack of at least passives on items and equipment, their usefulness overall. So For example, you have a ton of weapons and armor in this game you can upgrade. You can upgrade an Iron Sword to Iron Sword 2, and it obviously is stronger than the Iron Sword. Now, the problem is that when you take the time to do the extra in the game, there's no need to mess around with the other weapons at all. When I unlocked Garuda's weapon, for example, I thought I was going to unlock a skill on it or something. Like, for example, when using the skill of Garuda with the sword and attacks, your sword and attacks deal extra damage, right? So if you have Garuda's sword on and you're using Garuda's techniques, then they do extra. But no, you don't get any of that. It was just a cool looking sword. Even if the weapon had the simplest passives after maxing out their levels, it would have given the player a reason to go back to these weaker weapons despite their power because of the passives that are on them. Same goes for armor. Give them something, something. I know this is possible because of accessories like the Berserker Ring. I love the Berserker Ring. This is literally changes the properties of your dodge and adds an animation to it as well. Something as simple on Shiva's unlockable sword saying, if you dodge, your charge attack sends out a wave of ice. Would have been amazing for added depth to the player choices and imagination. Imagine that on Titan's weapon, where every attack that you connect in a 4-chain creates, an earthquake that knocks down enemies around you. Something simple would have been enough for the weapons. Something simple would have been enough for the equipment. Like, if you pay close attention to your armor, once you get certain things like the Genji armor, you don't need to go back to the others either. But you do get some classic swords and equipment in the game. It would have been nice that if we poured in a lot into the crafting system, even if that armor was 100 points in defense weaker than the final game armor, if they had given it a unique ability to allow players to create their own builds, it would have been far more useful. Because once again, this is an action RPG, but it's part stats and part the skill of the player. So anything would have been useful. I would have loved it if they had at least tried. So that's one of the most thing. It bothers me. It bothers me a lot. I'm actually. Yeah, let's cool down. Let's move on. You get how I feel about armors and weapons now. So the next one, unfortunately, are the cities and towns throughout the game. They look amazing. Love hearing conversations from people. Many of it interesting. Some just rumors or lore from the story. But that's about it. Usually for anything of larger locations, you stop there to talk to important social figures. Although their stories are all wonderful and interested me with great conclusions, that was all. These massive locations just to go back and forward and then leave, never needing to come back unless chasing subquests. Now, I understand following a theme. I can understand not needing mini games or something because it wouldn't fit how the world feels. It's supposed to be angry and bleak, and you can't sit there and have Clive playing cards. But in this case, I think it would have helped. You have major cities at every major location around the crystals. It would have been cool to have a couple of local mini games that the kids play to some favorites for adults. Then something the entire realm shares an interest in. For instance, a card game wouldn't make that much sense in this world, but you could have done something to support not only teaching people something in the world and warming them up to other ideas. For instance, let's say you go to Lubor and he tells you the kids have a splendid idea. They want to start a card game. After explaining to Clive what the fuck a card game is, he then goes on about it's not supposed to just be fun, but also teaches you about the creatures of the world, the wildlife, and most important, the people. So one of the cards can be an herb. That, of course, has its game effects, but on the back teaches you that the herb is from this location, it grows in this specific place, what they use it for. One of the cards could have been a goblin on the back of you, teaches you what goblins are and how to avoid them. Then have Clive go around the world selling starter decks and has to play these people to show them how it goes. Then 25 hours later in the game, you could have tournaments because it took the world by storm. Then connects to respecting bearers as well. You could teach the world about bearers, what they actually are, their connection to the world, what's actually going on, and have people become wise to the situation that Ultima is creating. All at the same time, the card game doesn't have to be too crazy either. It could be something as simple as what they had in Final Fantasy IX. As long as it's something that connects to people, because in this bleak ass world, a card game can make the biggest difference. Even though I didn't feel that they were needed at first, mini games, chocobo racings, about 50, 60 hours in, I truly felt like they were. Square Enix, I'm gonna be one of those people. Please have mini games in the next game. At least if you're planning on doing something this long, like everything else from the arcade mode, all the other extra you had was wonderful, but for the story mode, definitely try to fit some sort of mini game in there. Please, I would love to see that. I'm sure your fans would too. Oh, this is your favorite Chaos God. I know it's been a while, but I'm finally back, and I plan to have reviews coming left and right. This one took me a little bit. We finished Final Fantasy 16 back in maybe a month after it came out, so this should have been done, but I had some technical issues because, you know, gods also suffer from shitty fucking computers deciding to just conk out. But enough of that. We'll be sure to have something uploaded for you guys every once in a while. I'm going to try and get better at this. My human's trying to dive into voice acting too. I don't know if you can tell. But we're going to tackle all of this together. So I would love your feedback for this review especially. And also anybody willing to give me any pointers, anything at all. I would love it because